The sun hung high and merciless above Dust Vale, bleaching the main street into a glare of gold and bone. Heat rose in slow ripples from the packed earth as if the desert itself were breathing. At the far end of the street, a procession appeared, 2 men on horseback, and between them a small woman walking barefoot through dust. Her wrists were bound in rope. A red parasol turned in the wind from the balcony of the saloon, fluttering like a flag above her shame. Someone spat tobacco into the street. "Debt payment," a man muttered from his chair outside the general store. Halston finally got his due. Laughter rippled thinly across the porches, mean as dry grass crackling underfoot. The woman did not lift her eyes. Her hair was dark and uncombed, a single jade pin trembling near the crown. Each step left the faintest print in the dust before the wind erased it. Somewhere behind the crowd, a boy cried from the heat, and his mother hushed him. "Don't look, son. That's not our business." A rider came from the opposite end of town, dust ghosting his boots and hat brim. Eli Maddox. Broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, his shirt collar open, his eyes hidden under the shadow of the brim. A man folks said had buried both his wife and his laughter in the same grave 2 years back. He guided his horse to a halt as the crowd parted for him, their voices dipping into uneasy quiet. Eli saw her then, the woman in chains. Something in her stillness pricked a long-buried ache in him. Not pity, not yet. Something older, like recognition. Her face was streaked with dust, but her gaze held the same faraway calm he'd seen once in a dying mare, resigned, beautiful, past the point of crying. The saloon doors banged open. Bert Halston stepped out, all polished boots and whiskey breath, the kind of man who mistook fear for respect. "Bring her in," he barked. Time she earned her keep. No one spoke. The woman obeyed, head bowed. The rope between her wrists tugged against her skin, leaving a faint crimson welt. The crowd turned away, pretending to study the sky, the windows, their own hands, anywhere but her face. Eli dismounted slowly. His horse shifted beneath him, sensing tension. He watched as Halston shoved the woman inside and the doors swung shut behind her. A piano stuttered, laughter rose again, and Dust Vale returned to its heat and lies. He walked toward the general store, boots stirring dust devils. "Whose debt was it?" he asked the storekeeper quietly. "Some fella named Macready," came the answer. "Owed Halston near 200. The Chinaman couldn't pay, so he gave the woman instead. Said she was his niece or wife or something. Hard to tell with their kind." Eli's jaw tightened. He dropped his gaze, nodded once, and left without buying anything. Outside, a fly landed on his knuckle. He flicked it away, eyes still fixed on the saloon's painted door. That night, the wind changed. It came warm from the south, carrying the smell of rain that wouldn't come. Lamps glowed in windows like tired eyes refusing to close. Eli sat by his barn sharpening a knife he didn't need to use, his son asleep inside. The sound of metal against stone was slow and even, steady as a heartbeat. From across the ridge came faint music, Halston's piano, badly tuned, but steady. Then laughter, men's voices, the clink of glass. After that, a sound like a chair breaking and a woman's scream. Eli froze. The knife paused in his hand. He waited, every muscle listening. The sound came again, muffled, then silence. His hand tightened around the hilt until his knuckles whitened. He rose halfway, then stopped. The barn lantern flickered. He walked to the fence line instead, looking out at the dark ridge where the saloon's light shimmered faintly like a wound on the horizon. The scream had already been swallowed by night. His breath came rough in his throat. "Not your fight," he told himself. "You've got a boy to raise." He turned back toward the house. Inside, his son Sam stirred. The boy sat up, hair tousled, clutching his blanket. "Pa," he whispered, "who was that lady?" "The one the men brought today." Eli stopped in the doorway. Shadows from the lamp trembled across his boots. "Just someone passin' through, son," he said softly. She looked hurt. Eli swallowed. "Go to sleep." But the boy's eyes stayed open, small and solemn. "You didn't help her." The words struck like a spur to the ribs. Eli sat at the edge of the bed. Sometimes, he said slowly, you can't fix what's already been broken. Sam frowned. You fixed our wagon when it broke. Eli looked at his calloused hands, then at the sleeping child beside him. The boy's innocence made the lie burn deeper. He blew out the lamp. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the desert, a sound like a warning. Eli stood by the window, staring at the flickering saloon light miles away, a tiny flame fighting the dark. He thought of his wife's last breath, the same helpless sound. His chest tightened. The next morning dawned pale and dusty. The town smelled of smoke and spilled whiskey. Eli rode in early for supplies. Near the saloon's back alley, he saw a broken crate, a woman's slipper in the mud, and a streak of blood near the trough. He stared for a long time. Marshal Reeves came up beside him, hat in hand. "Morning, Maddox." Eli nodded. "Morning. You best keep your head down. Halston's in a temper. Says the woman tried to run. Claims he's got a right to punish her." Eli's eyes stayed on the bloodstain. "He hurt her bad?" The marshal sighed. "She's breathin'. For now." Eli said nothing. He walked his horse through town, the eyes of gossip following him, women whispering on porches, men pretending not to notice. He felt their judgment crawl over him like dust. They'd say he'd changed since his wife died, that he was getting soft. By noon, the saloon doors opened again. Lien staggered into the sunlight, bruised and trembling, carrying a bucket of dirty water. The wind tugged her hair loose. The jade pin glinted once before falling into the street. She didn't stoop to pick it up. Eli's horse shifted. His breath caught. The sound of that small ornament hitting dirt echoed louder than any gunshot. She met his eyes then, just for a heartbeat. There was no plea in her gaze, only exhaustion, the quiet knowledge of a life that had long stopped expecting mercy. Yet something flickered there too, small and fierce, the refusal to break completely. Eli looked away first. He told himself it was none of his business, that men like him weren't meant to play savior. He tied his horse, bought feed, and left without speaking to anyone. But as he rode past the saloon again, he saw the jade pin still lying in the dirt. He leaned down, picked it up, and slipped it into his coat pocket. That night, rain threatened again but never fell. The desert sky was purple and hollow, and somewhere the piano played a sad tune no one knew. Eli lay awake long after his boy had gone to sleep, the hairpin cold against his palm. And when the wind finally shifted toward morning, he whispered to himself, "She don't belong there." The morning came with a thin veil of mist over the plains, the kind that made the world seem half-dream. Eli Maddox stood by the corral fence, coffee cooling in his hand, watching his horses breathe fog into the chill air. Their steady rhythm calmed him, but only for a while. Every creak of the saddle leather reminded him of the jade pin still tucked in his coat pocket. He hadn't told a soul about it, not even his boy. He wasn't sure why he'd kept it, maybe out of decency, maybe out of something harder to name. The memory of that woman's bruised face haunted him. Lien. He'd heard her name whispered in the saloon the day before. A name soft as rain in a place that knew only dust. The thought made his jaw tighten. By noon, the town was already buzzing. Dustvale loved a story more than truth. At the general store, talk flowed like spilled molasses, sticky, slow, impossible to clean up. Eli walked in for nails and feed, and the men near the counter went quiet for half a breath before one of them spoke. "Halston's new housemaid's a sight, ain't she?" the man said, his grin wide and mean. "Barely speaks English, but she scrubs that floor like a penance." Someone chuckled. "Halston says she's worth every dollar of that McCready debt." Eli set the nails on the counter, each clink sharp as a gun cock. "She's a person," he said quietly. "Not a debt." The laughter stuttered, unsure. The storekeeper cleared his throat. "Nobody said she weren't, Eli. We're just talkin'." He paid without another word and left. Outside, the air felt heavier. He could still hear their voices even after he'd walked half a mile. Worth every dollar. The words pressed against his ribs like thorns. That evening, Sam sat on the porch steps, a stick in his hand, drawing circles in the dust. "Pa," he said, "Mrs. Alcott says that lady at the saloon is bad luck. She told the kids not to talk about her." Eli paused with his boot halfway out of the stirrup. "Mrs. Alcott don't know everything," he said. "She said folks like her don't belong here." Eli's eyes softened. "You listen to me, boy. Belongin' don't come from where you're born. It comes from how you carry yourself." Sam looked puzzled, then nodded slowly, the way children do when they sense a truth too big to hold. The night deepened. Coyotes sang far off, their cries lonely and wild. Eli sat by the window, watching lightning flare on the horizon. It looked like a storm might finally break, but he knew better. Dust Vale had a way of promising change it never delivered. Sleep didn't come. Around midnight, he heard hooves, a horse galloping too fast for safety. A shout, then silence. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The sound came from the direction of town, the faint echo of men's laughter drifting across the valley. The next day, Halston's man, Tate, came riding out to the ranch. His grin was thin, his eyes mean. "Morning, Maddox. Boss says you got something, belongs to him." Eli stood by the fence, wiping sweat from his neck. "Don't reckon I do. Found out you picked up some woman's trinket. Green pin, fancy lookin'. Belongs to his property." Eli's hand went to his coat pocket before he could stop it. Tate caught the gesture, smirked. "Figured. Best hand it back, for there's trouble. Tell your boss to come ask me himself." Tate leaned forward in the saddle, voice turning sharp. "He might just do that, with the marshal standin' by." Eli's eyes hardened. "You tell Halston he's got enough sins to answer for without draggin' me into his." The man spat into the dirt. "Your funeral." Then he turned and rode off. That evening, as the sun bled red across the prairie, Eli rode into town again. He told himself it was for supplies, but he knew better. The saloon lights glowed warm in the dusk, a cruel invitation. He tied his horse to the post and stepped inside. Smoke thickened the air, and laughter clung to it. Men played cards under the yellow lamplight. And there she was, Lien, kneeling to scrub the floor, her wrists still red from rope. When she lifted her head and saw him, surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by a quick, nervous bow. Halston sat at the bar, boots up, drink in hand. "Maddox," he drawled, voice thick with whiskey. "Heard you been collectin' my woman's things." "She ain't your woman," Eli said, calm but low. Halston grinned. "You gonna make her yours, then?" "That it?" Eli didn't answer. He took the jade pin from his pocket, placed it on the counter. "This belongs to her." Halston's grin faltered. "Every damn thing she's got belongs to me." The room went still. Lien froze, her hand clutching the rag so tight her knuckles turned white. Eli turned to her. "You want it back?" She hesitated, then nodded once, eyes wide. Halston slammed his glass down. "You hand that over and I'll—" Before he could finish, Eli's hand closed around his wrist. The glass toppled, shattering. Men stood up, chairs scraping wood. "You'll what?" Eli's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Beat her again? You'd best think hard before you lift another hand." Halston jerked free, red-faced. "Marshall hear about this." "I hope he does," Eli said. Then he set the jade pin gently in Lien's palm. For a moment, everything slowed, the light, the dust, even the smoke hanging between them. Her fingers trembled as they closed around it. No words passed, but her eyes said more than speech ever could. Eli turned and walked out, the saloon doors swinging behind him. Outside, the night air hit him like cold water. He stood on the porch, breathing hard, fists unclenching. Somewhere inside, a piano started again, the tune awkward and slow. It sounded like someone learning to play Hope. On the ride home, the moon rose full and silver, brushing the land with quiet mercy. But guilt rode with him, heavy in the saddle. He thought of his wife, the way she'd begged him once to stand up for a woman being cursed at in town. He hadn't then. Maybe this was his penance. He reached the ranch before dawn. The lamp was still burning in the window. Sam was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed, waiting. "Pa," he whispered, "you smell like the saloon." Eli smiled faintly. "Won't happen again. Did you help her?" He hesitated, hat twisting in his hands. "I tried." Sam nodded solemnly, as if that were enough. But when Eli lay down that night, he knew trying wouldn't be. Just before sleep took him, he heard thunder again, closer this time, heavy and sure. He dreamed of chains breaking and of eyes like dawn after long winter. In the distance, a storm gathered, dark and certain, moving straight for Dust Vale. The rain came before dawn, sudden and hard, turning the parched earth into dark, breathing mud. Thunder rolled over the plains like the growl of something waking. Eli Maddox stepped out onto the porch, hat low, lantern in hand. The air was alive, wet, electric, alive in a way that made a man remember he was small. He liked that feeling. It washed him clean. But that morning, the storm carried another sound beneath the rain, something faint, like crying. He stood listening, the downpour drumming on his shoulders. For a moment, he thought it was wind through the canyon. Then it came again, closer, ragged. He took his rifle, mounted his horse, and followed the sound through the rain-thick dark. The road into town was half flooded, the air full of the scent of wet sage. By the time he reached the outskirts, lightning split the sky wide open. That's when he saw her. Lien was on her knees in the mud beside the saloon, her dress torn, face pale beneath the rain. She wasn't moving. Her hands were still bound, one rope broken and trailing behind her like a dying snake. Eli dismounted, his boots sinking into the muck. "Hey!" he said softly, kneeling beside her. She blinked, dazed, lips trembling but soundless. He touched her shoulder. She flinched. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe." She looked at him through the curtain of rain, recognition flickering in her eyes. She tried to speak, but the words came out broken, half English, half prayer. Halston's door banged open behind them. He appeared, hair wet, face red. "You again," he snarled. "That woman's mine." Eli rose slowly, turning toward him, water dripping from his hat brim. "She ain't a thing to own. She's runnin' off in the middle of my work. You hand her back, or I'll—" Eli's voice cut through the storm. "You'll what?" "Hit her again." The thunder answered for Halston. He hesitated, his rage wobbling into fear. Eli's silence had that effect, calm enough to sound like promise. The marshal appeared then, drawn by the shouting. Reeves looked between them, the storm soaking his coat. "Halston," he said, "take your sorry hide inside. This woman needs a doctor, not a leash." Halston spat into the mud but didn't argue. He slammed the door, and the saloon light vanished. Reeves sighed. "Town's half-wrecked already, and now this. Maddox, you got a dry roof." "Always," Eli said. "Then take her. She can't stay here tonight. I'll square it with the council later." Eli nodded, lifting Lien into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her head falling against his chest. The heat of her skin startled him, fever burning bright under the cold rain. By the time they reached his ranch, dawn was only a pale thought behind the clouds. Sam was at the window, wide-eyed. "Pa." "Get blankets," Eli said. "And water." He laid her on the cot near the fire. Steam rose from her soaked dress as he covered her with a quilt. She stirred, whispering something in Chinese, soft syllables full of sorrow. Eli sat beside her, wiping mud from her hands with the corner of his shirt. One wrist was swollen, purple from the rope. He frowned, cutting it free with his knife. Her eyes opened halfway. Why help me?" "Storm don't care who it drowns," he said. "Neither do I." She blinked at him as if trying to understand, then drifted into sleep. 4 hours, the rain kept falling, a steady him on the roof. Sam sat cross-legged near the hearth, watching. "She's pretty," he whispered. Eli gave a faint smile. "Don't matter right now. She's sick. She looks scared. She's got reason. The boy nodded, as if that explained the world. When the fever broke near noon, she woke again to the smell of stew. Eli was at the table, patching a saddle strap. She tried to sit up, dizzy but stubborn. He was beside her in a moment. "Slow," he said, steadying her shoulder. "You're safe here." Her gaze wandered the cabin, rough beams, the ticking clock, the shelf with his wife's photograph. She pointed softly. "Her." Eli followed her finger, his throat tightening. "Yeah, my wife. Passed 2 winters ago." Lien lowered her eyes. "Sorry." He nodded once, not trusting his voice. She reached out, tracing the edge of the blanket, feeling its warmth. "Your son," she said after a moment. "Sam," he answered. "He's the reason I keep breathin'." The boy peeked from behind the doorframe, shy but curious. She smiled at him, small, genuine, like sunlight breaking through fog. He blushed and ran off, and she laughed softly, a sound so gentle Eli almost forgot to breathe. That night, the rain eased into mist. The 3 of them ate by firelight. Lien didn't say much, but her eyes followed every sound, the crackle of wood, the creak of spoons, the boy's quiet humming. When she reached for her bowl, her hands trembled. Eli helped her steady it without a word. Later, as Sam slept curled on the rug, Eli poured tea for her. She tasted it and smiled faintly. "Warm," she said. "You're welcome." They sat in silence, the storm's tail end sighing outside. He caught her watching the rain through the window, expression soft, almost wistful. "You ever seen snow?" he asked. She shook her head. "In home, only rain." "Snow's quieter," he said. "Like the world forgets how to talk." Her eyes lifted to his, and for a heartbeat, something passed between them. 2 souls used to silence, finding it less lonely together. The next morning, sunlight filtered through thinning clouds. The air smelled new, washed clean. Lien stepped outside barefoot, the wet grass shining beneath her feet. She turned her face toward the light, eyes closed. Sam brought her a small wooden horse he'd carved and held it out shyly. She crouched to take it, bowing her head in thanks. "Beautiful," she whispered. "You make." He nodded proudly. Eli watched from the doorway, an ache rising in his chest he couldn't name, half gratitude, half fear of wanting too much. By afternoon, gossip had already spread. Mrs. Olcott rode up with a basket and a tongue sharp as a thorn. "Heard you've got company, Eli," she said, eyes darting past his shoulder. "The town's talkin'. Folks don't take kindly to harborin'." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Her kind." Eli met her gaze without blinking. "Then the town can talk itself hoarse." The woman sniffed and rode off, muttering. Inside, Lien stood by the window, having understood enough to feel the sting. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and she whispered, "I go. No trouble." "You ain't trouble," Eli said. "You're hurt. You stay." She looked at him, uncertain, then nodded once and turned back to the fire. That night, the storm returned, not with rain this time, but with wind, howling and restless. Eli checked the shutters while Lien tucked the boy under quilts. When she passed him the lamp, their hands brushed. Neither spoke, but neither pulled away. Outside, the wind dragged across the plains, carrying whispers from town, the voices of judgment, distant yet closing in. Inside, 3 souls sat in fragile peace beneath one roof, unaware that by morning, Dust Vale would come calling. The first week after the storm passed like a fragile truce. The fields breathed again, green pushing through the mud. Birds returned to the fence posts. But inside Dust Vale, peace soured quick. Rumor was a wildfire, and this one had Lien's name at its heart. The saloon whispered it, the mercantile repeated it, and by Sunday, the church porch murmured it under God's breath. They said Eli Maddox had taken in a China woman. That she'd bewitched him. That she cooked strange things, prayed to idols, and slept beneath the same roof as his boy. Nobody asked what truth sounded like. They didn't need truth, only the thrill of a scandal they could sip with their morning coffee. Eli knew it was coming the first time he rode into town for feed. Conversation stilled when he stepped through the store's door. The air thickened with politeness too sharp to be kind. He felt their eyes on his back while measuring out grain. When he reached for his wallet, the storekeeper, old Mr. Pike, cleared his throat. "Eli," Pike said slowly, "folks are wonderin' if that woman's plannin' to stay long." Eli looked up. "Don't see how that's their concern." Pike shifted, uneasy. "Well, you know how small towns are. People talk. Sayin', it don't look proper." Eli's jaw tightened. "Proper died with my wife." He left his coins on the counter and walked out, the bell above the door clanging like judgment. Outside, children stared as he mounted his horse. One little girl pointed at him and whispered something her mother shushed. The world had gone quiet but mean. He felt it under his skin. At home, Lien noticed the change in his face before he spoke. She was hanging wet linens by the fence, the white fabric catching sunlight like surrender. "Town," she said softly, not asking but knowing. He nodded. "They're talkin'. Always do." She looked down. "I can go." The words struck him harder than anger. "You're not leavin', because they can't mind their tongues." Her voice was small. "They hate what they don't know." "Then they'll learn," he said, but it sounded hollow even to him. That evening, she cooked rice with wild onions. Sam ate 2 bowls and grinned like it was Christmas. She laughed at his joy, her first Real laugh since arriving. Eli watched them, something tender tightening in his chest. When she caught him looking, she blushed and lowered her eyes. But Dust Vale wasn't done. 2 days later, Eli found his ranch hands waiting by the barn, hats in hand. "We're quittin'," one said, not meeting his gaze. "Ain't got nothin' against you, boss, but folks don't like what's goin' on out here. Sayin' you're keepin' a foreigner." Eli folded his arms. "You men worked my land 5 years. You know better than that." "Maybe so," the older one said, "but my wife's been spat on twice this week. Can't have that." Eli nodded once, slow. "Then go." They left before sunset, leaving silence behind them. The next morning, he and Lien worked side by side, he repairing the fence, she carrying nails. Sweat glistened on his brow, and she handed him water without speaking. Their hands brushed. The air between them trembled. Later, when she brought lunch, she said softly, "You lose help because of me." He shook his head. "They left because they're cowards." "Still pain," she whispered. He met her gaze. "Not all pain's bad. Some teaches a man what he's made of." The days stretched long, each filled with whispers carried by wind. Mrs. Alcott returned with more advice. She lingered by the porch, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Eli," she began sweetly, "you're a good man, but people see things. That woman walks your boy to the creek. She ain't from here. Think of Sam's future." Eli's patience snapped. "Sam's future's none of your business, and neither's hers." Mrs. Alcott's smile faltered. "You can't fight the whole town. Watch me." When she left, Lien stepped from the shadows, eyes downcast. "She right," she murmured. "I bring shame." He turned toward her, voice rough. "You bring peace, Lien. This place was quiet before, but not alive." Her lips parted, trembling. She whispered, "Peace is small gift." "It's enough," he said. But that night, Eli sat by the dying fire, guilt gnawing through his calm. He knew what towns could do when they decided who was guilty. He remembered the winter his wife died, how they'd blamed him for not calling the doctor sooner. He'd kept his head down then. But this time felt different. This time, someone's dignity hung in the balance. A knock came at the door near midnight. Marshal Reeves stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. His expression was weary, eyes full of pity. "Eli," he said, "Halston's filed complaint. Says you stole property. Claims she owes him debt still unpaid." Eli's voice dropped low. You know that ain't true. I know. But the law don't always follow truth. He's got friends in the council. They'll come askin questions soon. Lien stood in the doorway, shawl around her shoulders, face pale but composed. He come here? She asked quietly. Maybe, Reeves said. And if he does, it won't be to talk. After he left, silence filled the cabin like thick smoke. Sam stirred in his sleep. The clock ticked. Lien stared at the fire until her eyes glistened. I make trouble again. Eli stepped closer. You didn't make trouble. Men did. You lose friends, work, name, all for me. Why? He hesitated, his voice almost breaking. Because I remember what it's like to be left without help. My wife cried once in town. No one stepped forward. I can't watch that happen twice. She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, Your wife, she was lucky. He shook his head. No, I was the lucky one. And I ain't wastin' what she taught me. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. The firelight caught the scars on his hands, the tenderness in her face. For a moment, the world shrank to that single room, two souls standing between mercy and ruin. Eli turned toward the window. Through the storm, he saw movement on the ridge, lanterns, faint but steady, like eyes watching from the dark. Halston's men. He reached for his rifle and spoke quietly, almost to himself. It's startin'. Lien stepped beside him, voice barely a whisper. You fight. He glanced at her. Only if they make me. She nodded once, her chin lifting, fragile but firm. Outside, the wind carried a distant shout. Then another. The sound of hooves spread through the night like a warning drum. Inside, the fire dimmed, the light trembling across their faces. Lien touched the jade pin in her hair, steadying her breath. Eli lowered the lamp flame and whispered, Keep Sam close. In the silence that followed, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for dawn or disaster. Dawn came thin and red, painting the plains like an open wound. The air was still, the kind of quiet that felt wrong, like the world was waiting for something it didn't want to see. Eli Maddox stood at the edge of his porch, rifle in hand, watching the horizon darken with riders. They came slow but steady, a crooked line of men cutting through the golden grass. Sunlight glinted off iron and bad intent. Inside, Lien was dressing Sam, her hands trembling only once. She'd braided her hair tightly, the jade pin glimmering in the dim light. When she turned toward Eli, her eyes were calm, though her heartbeat could have split glass. They come? She asked. He nodded. Halston's Leodin. She swallowed hard. You tell me what do. Stay inside, he said. Keep Sam behind you. Her gaze lingered on him, a flicker of fear and something else. Faith, maybe. You fight for me? I fight for what's right, he said. And that's you, whether the town knows it or not. He touched her hand briefly before stepping outside. The warmth of her skin stayed in his palm long after he let go. The riders reached the gate. Dust rose around them like smoke. Halston sat tall at the front, hat low, grin cruel as ever. Behind him were 4 men from town, men Eli had shared whiskey with once. They wouldn't meet his eyes. Morning, Maddox. Halston called. Fine day for justice. Eli stepped down from the porch, calm and deliberate. You don't know the meaning of that word. Halston's grin widened. Don't I? You took what's mine. Time to return the favor. She ain't yours, Eli said, voice steady. Never was. Halston spit into the dirt. Paper says otherwise. Marshall back me soon as he hears. Eli's eyes flicked toward the ridge. Then maybe he oughta hear it from me. Halston's horse sidestepped. I didn't come to talk law. I came to take her. Eli's hand rested on his rifle, fingers light but certain. You'll have to go through me. The men behind Halston shifted uneasily. None wanted to draw first. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Halston sneered. You'd throw your name, your land, Maybe your life away for a whore? Something inside Eli snapped. Not anger, not rage, just a clean, burning certainty. For her dignity, he said. And for the boy who'll learn from it. Halston laughed once, harsh and hollow. Then you're a fool. Maybe, Eli said softly. But I'm still standin'. Halston's hand went for his gun. The world shrank to a heartbeat. Eli moved faster. The crack split the stillness like lightning. Halston jerked backward, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed into the dirt. The echo rolled over the land, chasing the wind. One of the riders fired in panic. The bullet tore through Eli's shoulder. He staggered, caught himself, fired back. Another man fell. The others turned their horses and fled, dust and fear trailing behind them. In seconds, the silence returned, heavier this time, full of ghosts. Eli sank to one knee, blood seeping through his sleeve. The gun smoked in his hand, the smell of metal and rain mixing in the air. From the porch came a cry, Lien, running barefoot across the yard, her skirts whipping around her. Eli! She called, kneeling beside him. Her hands pressed to the wound, trembling but sure. You hurt bad. He smiled weakly. Just a scratch. Tears blurred her eyes. No lie. He chuckled, breath shallow. Maybe a little. The marshal arrived moments later, coat flapping behind him, horse lathered with sweat. His gaze swept the scene, the bodies, the blood, the rifle. Lord Almighty, he muttered, dismounting. Halston came for her, Eli said, voice rough but clear. Didn't leave me a choice. Reeves nodded grimly. Ain't no jury in the world will hang you for this. He looked at Lien, then back at Eli. But the town'll talk louder than the law ever could. Eli met his eyes. Let 'em. The marshal tipped his hat. I'll tell the council it's done. You've earned your peace. Peace. The word felt heavy, foreign. Eli wasn't sure he believed in it anymore. Reeves rode off, and for a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Then Lien spoke, her voice low. You save me again. Why always risk? Eli looked at her, the sun catching the tears on her cheeks. Because you shouldn't have to live like you owe anyone your breath. She leaned closer, pressing his hand to her chest. Then I owe you my heart. He shook his head. You don't owe me nothin'. Just live free. That afternoon, the town gathered at a distance, pretending curiosity was morality. They watched as Reeves ordered Halston's body taken away, but none dared come near the ranch. Word spread quick, how Eli Maddox killed a man at noon for the woman he wouldn't give up. Some called it sin. Others called it love. The truth, as always, lived somewhere between. Days passed. The wound healed slow. Lien tended him each night, quiet and gentle, her hands smelling of sage and soap. Sam fetched water and told stories by the fire. The boys' laughter filled the house again, mending what the years had hollowed out. When Eli could finally walk without wincing, he found her in the field, collecting wildflowers. The air was soft with spring. He watched her kneel, sunlight spilling over her hair, and something inside him loosened. She looked up, smiling. You walk now. Good. He nodded. Thanks to you. She rose, holding out a small bouquet, yellow blooms, delicate as hope. For house, she said. He took them, rough fingers brushing hers. You've made this house more of a home than it ever was. Her eyes filled, shining like river water. Home, she whispered, tasting the word like it might vanish if spoken too loud. That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sky turn to fire. Sam played with the dog, laughter echoing through the hills. Lien leaned against the post, her shoulder barely touching Eli's. He didn't move away. You ever think of leavin'? He asked quietly. She shook her head. No more run. Storm over. He turned to her. You sure? Yes, she said, her voice steady. Here I live. Not hide. For a while, they watched the sun sink, orange bleeding into purple. The world felt smaller, safer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the jade pin, polished now, and handed it to her. I kept it safe, he said. Guess it's time it found its way home. She hesitated, tears gathering. Then she pressed it back into his hand. It already did. The next morning, Dustvale woke to find the ranch quiet, smoke curling gently from the chimney. Some said Eli and the woman were married by a traveling preacher that week. Others swore she'd left before sunrise. The truth, again, was quieter than both. On the porch sat 3 cups, 2 half-drunk, 1 small and untouched. Beside them, wildflowers lay across the table, still damp with morning dew. Inside, Lien taught Sam to write his name in careful strokes. Eli watched from the doorway, heart steady for the first time in years. When she glanced back and smiled, something deep inside him exhaled. The world no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like a beginning. Outside, the prairie shimmered under the noon sun, the same light that had witnessed cruelty, now turned to blessing. Eli stepped onto the porch, breathing in the scent of earth and spring. He could almost hear his wife's voice in the wind, soft and approving. You did right, Eli. You kept your word to the living. Lien joined him, her hand slipping quietly into his. They stood there a long time, watching Sam chase a butterfly through the grass. The sky was wide, forgiving. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every silence she had survived. No more chains, she said. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. No more. The old soul who watched from afar, the one who told this story, might have said the world turned that day, not because of gunfire or blood, but because 2 broken people chose mercy instead of bitterness. And if you've ever known judgment, if the world ever made you small, remember this: sometimes love doesn't come to save you. It comes to teach you how to stand, even when the town won't look you in the eye. That's all grace really is: 2 souls choosing kindness in a world built on cruelty, and refusing to look away.